This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome all of our TorahAnytime viewers. And we are on a roll lately. We've been talking about a lot of controversial topics. So let the good times continue. We have a very juicy topic this evening. So a topic that is certainly ala parak. It's one of the hot issues that people are thinking about, especially the last couple of weeks. And that is the issue of the HaBayis, the Temple Mount. What exactly are the guidelines of, is it permitted to go on the HaBayis? Where are you allowed to go? What are the restrictions? What are the parameters? What are the guidelines? And this is something we're not going to discuss on a political level. We're going to discuss on a halachic level. And we're going to see that this is something that every Jew has to be made aware of in a very clear and definitive manner. Okay. So we begin with a number of Mishnayos in Masechta Kelim. Now you want to know, what does this have to do with Parshas Vayeitzey? Oh, it's obvious. Yaakov Avinu goes to sleep. He has a dream. He sees the ladder. He wakes up from the dream. He says, "Ma noira hamakom hazeh." How awesome is this place? Ein zeh kiyim beis Elokim. This is the house of God. V'zeh shar hashamayim. He says, "Achein yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh." God is here. Va'anochi lo yadati, and I didn't know. Says Rashi that if Yaakov Avinu would have realized that he's in the Makom HaMikdash, he never would have gone to sleep. Now this is before even it was the Beis HaMikdash. But you see the awesome Kedusha of the Makom HaMikdash, that even before it became it, still had Yaakov Avinu known what it would have been, he wouldn't have even slept. So that just gives you a glimpse as to the Kedusha of the HaBayis. Okay, and the Makom HaMikdash. So the Mishnah in Masechta Kelim tells us that there are 10 levels of Kedusha, 10 levels of sanctity. And the first level is, Eretz Yisrael is more holy than any other land. Okay? Even than the United States of America, right? Even than Brooklyn. Eretz Yisrael is holier than any other place in the world. Fine. That's the first halacha of the Mishnah. And the Mishnah says regarding what? Regarding the fact that the oimer could only be brought from produce of Eretz Yisrael. The bikurim, the first fruits, only come from the produce of Israel. The shtei halechem. Okay. The next level of Kedusha, says the Mishnah, in Masechta Kelim, Parak Aleph, Mishnah Zayin, any walled city in Eretz Yisrael has special Kedusha. Not just Yerushalayim. Any walled city, and that is, if you're a Mitzayra, you're sent out of the city. Any city in Eretz Yisrael that has a wall on it. If you're a Mitzayra, now, is there a possibility for tzaras today? There very well may be. If you jump ahead to number 22, of Yaakov Emden in the Shelas Yavitz, Chelek Aleph, Siman Kuf Lamed Vav, discusses the possibility that of attaining tzaras even today. Okay? The next level of Kedusha is within the walls of Yerushalayim. Now within the walls of Yerushalayim has a special name. It's called Machane Yisrael. Okay? Machane Yisrael. The Jewish camp. Within the walls of Yerushalayim, you could eat their kachim kalim, minor sanctified items. You could eat their meiser sheni. That's the next level of Kedusha. The next level is progressively higher, is the HaBayis, the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount has tremendous Kedusha. The Temple Mount, by the way, also has another name, Machane Leviyah, the camp of the Levites. Who is disqualified from going on the Temple Mount? Anyone who became bodily impure. For example, a Zav. Now, a Zav is a man who emitted a certain type of emission, which, for argument's sake, at this point in the Shiur, we're going to assume that we don't know what that is today anymore. A Zav is a man who emits a certain type of emission, or a Zava, a woman who emits that, a Nida, a woman who is a Nida, who's menstruating, the Yoldais, a woman who has given birth, also a man who is a Baal Keri, a man who emitted Zera, seed. All of these people are impure, bodily impure. They cannot go on the Temple Mount. What is the punishment of somebody who is tameh in any of those above mentioned tumos and goes to the Temple Mount? The punishment is nothing less than kares, untimely death. Okay? Any bodily tuma, zav, zava, nida, yoledes, balkeri. Okay? But that's easily rectified. You could go to the mikvah. The next level is, now we're up to the Beis HaMikdash itself. Now, you take a look.
Go to the mikveh, you can go to HaBayis, right?
After you go to the mikvah, you could go to this part of the HaBayis as of the first 2 minutes of the shiur. Yeah. But we still have a long way to go. Okay. The next level is the chel. The chel is the exterior area of the Beis HaMikdash itself. Goyim are not allowed in. Tamei meis, someone who touched a dead body or is in the same room or building as a dead body, can't go into the mikdash. Could someone who's a tamei meis go on the HaBayis? Of course. Yes. There's a big misconception. People think, why we don't go to the HaBayis? Because everyone today has come into some type of contact with a dead body. Either you went to a levaya, or you escorted a dead body, or you're in the same room. That's not why we don't go to the HaBayis. Because someone who's touched a dead body is allowed to go on the HaBayis. It's only that you can't go into the chel, the area, the exterior area of the Beis HaMikdash. Then the next level is Ezras Noshim. Ezras Noshim is not the women's section. Ezras Noshim was a big area, a big antechamber in front of the Beis HaMikdash. And there's a rabbinic restriction that even if you went to the mikvah for bodily tumah, you still can't go into this area. The next level is Ezras Yisrael. That's even more interior into the mikdash itself. Ezras Yisrael, that means like this. There's certain tumahs where even if you go to the mikvah, you have to bring a carbon. So technically speaking, you're pure, but you didn't bring the carbon yet. If you didn't bring the carbon, you could go up to the Ezras Yisrael. And then the Ezras Kohanim. Ezras Kohanim are even more. Even a Yisrael cannot go into the Ezras Kohanim, even if he's tahar, unless he has a specific need. But just to go in just to check it out, can't go in. And then you have the Bein Ha'ulam V'la Mizbeach, past the Mizbeach. Past the Mizbeach, you can't go in, even if you're a Kohen, if you haven't taken a haircut, or if, let's say, you're a Baal Mum, can't go there. The Heichal, you can't go in, even if you're a Kohen, even if you're pure, unless you first wash your hands and feet. And then the holiest area on earth is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, only the Kohen Gadol, only on Yom Kippur, only with the Ketara. Okay. So what we've learned so far is there are 10 levels of Kedusha. But if you want to keep it simple, we could break it down into 3 levels, just to keep it very simple. There's something that corresponds to Machane Shechina, something that corresponds to Machane Levia, something that corresponds to Machane Yisrael. And we'll be very clear. The wall of Yerushalayim and interior is Machane Yisrael. That means from the old city begins the Machane Yisrael, and you're allowed to go there as long as you're not a Mitzayra. So we could assume we are not Mitzayram. Okay? Unless, you wake up in the morning tomorrow, and you see, even though you went to Florida, you see this white big spot on your cheeks, with 2 white hairs growing out of it, then you need to speak to your local Kohen. But other than that, we could safely assume you're not a Mitzayra, and you're allowed to go into Yerushalayim, and we go. All observant Jews have no problem going into the old city of Yerushalayim. The next level is something called Machane Levia. Machane Levia is the Temple Mount. And the question is, do Orthodox observant Jews, are they allowed to go on the Temple Mount? What's the problem? Well, a woman might be a Nida, she might have given birth. A man may be a Balkari. Balkari is any man that emitted seed, is a Balkari and is Tameh until they go to the mikvah. Any of these tumos cannot go on the Temple Mount with punishment of kares. And then, of course, you have the Machane Shechina. Machane Shechina begins at the Ezras Yisrael. And what we want to deal with this evening is this is all fine and dandy. when the Beis HaMikdash stood. But in case you haven't noticed, for the last 2,000 years, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, right? You know that? You're aware of that, right? We don't have a Beis HaMikdash anymore. That's what we daven for 3 times a day. To Rabbi Hashem should rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Sheyibana Beis HaMikdash Mher v'Yameinu. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. So does that area that used to be the Beis HaMikdash and used to be HaBayis, yeah, it's the mountain that had the Beis HaMikdash, but it doesn't have the Beis HaMikdash anymore. Does it have Kedusha today? Or do we say when the Goyim destroyed the temple, the Kedusha left? For instance, if let's say you have a shul, and you decide to sell the shul as a bowling alley, does the shul have Kedusha anymore? No. So a Beis HaMikdash that's destroyed, does it have Kedusha or does it not have Kedusha? So what does it depend on? It depends on whether the people who sanctified it, did they sanctify it temporarily or did they sanctify it eternally? And that's a machlokes Tanoim. The Gemara in Masechta Megillah on Daf Yud, and in many places in Shas, bring down that Bisman Hazeh, you're allowed to be makriv karbanos, even though there's no Beis HaMikdash. And you're allowed to eat kachei kadashim, even though there are no curtains. And you're allowed to eat kachim kalim, even though there's no wall. You know why? Kedusha rishayna kitchala shaita v'kitchala asad lavai. The original Kedusha of Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash was temporary and eternal, which means it was for then and for all time. Says the Gemara, there's another opinion. Rebbe Lezer Savar, like Kitchal Asalavai, it was only sanctified for that time. And nowadays, it's a free-for-all. Anyone could go there. It's a machlokes Tanoim. And the question we would like to investigate is, how do we paskin? Are you allowed to go there today? Do we say the Kedusha left? Or do we say the Kedusha is eternal? Now Rabbi said there's another aspect of this. Because besides the fact that someone who's Tameh is not allowed to go to the Beis HaMikdash if it has Kedusha, there's another mitzvah in the Torah, and that mitzvah is called Moira Mikdash. You have to be afraid of the Beis HaMikdash. Now what does it mean, be afraid? Be afraid of the walls? It's like a haunted house? What are you afraid? No, you're afraid of the one who resides there. To be afraid of God. What does that demand? So the Rambam says in Hilchos Beis HaBechira, Parak Zayin, Halacha Beis, what does it mean to be afraid? Number one, don't walk in with your cane. You can't walk into the Beis HaMikdash with your walking stick. Number two, you're not allowed to wear shoes. You must remove your shoes. Number three, you have to remove your money belt, your wallet. Your wallet. Don't say, I don't carry cash, only plastic. No, it doesn't matter what you carry in your wallet. Even if you only carry American Express, you cannot bring your wallet into the Beis HaMikdash. You can't have dirt on your feet. You cannot spit. You could only go there for a Dvar Mitzvah. Now the Rambam doesn't tell us what a Dvar Mitzvah is. However, the Rambam in his commentary to Mishnayos, in Masechta Bracha, says, Ela la'inyan me'inyanei tefillah v'avodah. Mitzvah means you go there to pray. So let's say I wanted to go to the Temple Mount to tour. I want to get good photos. It's a great photo app, right? I want to take pictures. Am I allowed to go there to take pictures? Depends. If the Kedusha has left when the Goyim destroyed it, I could go there today and take pictures. But if there still has Kedusha, even if I'm not Tameh, even if I'm Tahar, I can't go there unless I'm going there to perform a mitzvah. Just to go into the Makam HaMikdash, you cannot go. You would have to take... So in other words, let's say somebody wants to go there who's Tahar. Do they have to take off their shoes? It depends. Does the Beis HaMikdash retain its Kedusha? Does it not retain its Kedusha? Was it temporary Kedusha? Was it eternal Kedusha? That's the question we have to deal with. And the answer to this question is, it's a machlokes Rishonim. There are different opinions. The opinion of the Rambam is, the Kedusha of the Makam HaMikdash is eternal. The Rambam says, you know where I get it from? Because the Torah says, Es shabsoisai tishmeiru, v'es mikdashai tiro, Ani Hashem. Keep Shabbos, fear the Mikdash. So there's an analogy between Shabbos and the Beis HaMikdash, which means, says the Gemara in Yevamos, on Daf Vavam Abayis, number 7. So long as you have to keep Shabbos, you have to honor the Mikdash. Do we have to keep Shabbos today? Of course. So if you have to keep Shabbos, you have to honor the Mikdash. And therefore the Rambam says, Bizman Hazeh, if you want to go to the Makom HaMikdash, take off your shoes, remove your money belt, remove your stick, clean your feet, and you can only go there to do a mitzvah. What about, could someone who's tameh go to the Beis HaMikdash today? Go to HaBayis today? The Rambam's opinion is no. Listen very carefully. The Rambam says that there's a fundamental difference between the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael and the Kedusha of the Mikdash. The Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was temporary. When Yoshua ben Nun conquered the land, he only injected Kedusha until the Jews are kicked out. When the Jews were kicked out in the times of Nebuchadnezzar, Eretz Yisrael has no more Kedusha. But the Beis HaMikdash has eternal Kedusha, says the Rambam. Why is that? Why does Eretz Yisrael only have temporary Kedusha and the Beis HaMikdash has eternal Kedusha? Says the Rambam. Because the Kedusha of the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael was injected by Yehoshua ben Nun when he conquered it. So he conquered it, it has Kedusha. When the Goyim reconquered it, it loses its Kedusha. By the way, Ezra reconquered it back. And whatever Ezra reconquered has Kedusha today, whatever he didn't, doesn't. But says the Rambam, the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash has nothing to do with Yehoshua ben Nun. It has nothing to do with Ezra. The Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash is because of God's divine presence, and the Shechina is eternal. God is always at the Mikdash, He's always at the HaBayis, and therefore the Kedusha of the HaBayis is eternal. That is the psak of the Rambam. Okay? So the Rambam paskins. 2014. Could you go to the Makom HaMikdash just to be a tourist? No. You're over mitzvah saseh d'oraisa. Let's say someone is a Bal Keri, or a woman is a Nida, and chas v'shalom they go to the HaBayis, according to the Rambam, chayiv kares. Let's say someone is a Tamei Meis, and they go to the Azara, according to the Rambam, you're chayiv kares. Why? But the Goyim destroyed it, there's no more Beis HaMikdash. But God is there, and God is eternal, and the sanctity of the place is eternal. That's the opinion of the Rambam. But, as William Shakespeare said, wherever there's a Rambam, the Ravid is not far behind. That was a joke. Okay. So, says the Ravid, I disagree. Says the Ravid, Amar Avram, this argument of the Rambam, Maimonides, he made it up. There's no evidence for this. That the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash is eternal. I don't know where he got it from. You know what my opinion is, says the Ravid? That the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is eternal. And the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash is temporary. Just the opposite of the Rambam. The Rambam says Eretz Yisrael's Kedusha is temporary. The Beis HaMikdash's Kedusha is eternal. And the Ravid says, no, the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is eternal. The Kedusha of the Mikdash is temporary. You know why? Because Ezra knew that one day the Beis HaMikdash would be destroyed. And Mashiach would come. And God would return. And when God returns in the times of the third Beis HaMikdash, it's going to be a completely different level of holiness. So Ezra only temporarily sanctified it. So that when Mashiach comes, it could be re-sanctified. Says the Ravid, there is no Isser Kares to go to the Beis HaMikdash today. Says the Ravid, what I am telling you is a prophetic secret that only Ezra knew. That Ezra only sanctified the Beis HaMikdash temporarily. And therefore, you ready for the Ravid? Lefikach hanichnas ata sham ein boy kares. Let's say a Bal Keri or a Nida goes to the HaBayis today, says the Ravid. No kares. So, 10 minutes into the Shiur, if I were to ask you, if somebody had a bodily tumah and they went to the HaBayis, could you go or not? We would say good. That's the answer I'm looking for. It's machlokes. The Rambam says you can't go and you're chayiv kares. The Ravid says, right now, it's okay. Come the Achronim, and most specifically, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, in his Sefer Mishpat Kohen, that all the poskim quote, including Tzitz Eliezer, and he says you have to know how to read a Ravid. Ravid didn't say you could go there. The Ravid just said if you go there, you're not chayiv kares. But you still are violating, says Rav Kook, not only an Isser D'Rabbanan, but an Isser D'Oraisa. So really, there's no major nafkamina between the Rambam and the Ravid. Everyone would agree you can't go to the HaBayis if you're tameh. The question is, the Rambam would say you're chayiv kares. The Ravid would say you're not chayiv kares, but it's still a biblical prohibition. Comes along the Ramban, Nachmanides, in his Sefer Melchemes, Masechet Avodah Zarah, and this is a Mamish Metzia. The Ramban says, go to the HaBayis and have a good time. It's mutter l'chatchila. Okay, you don't have to dance, you don't have to play music, but that's the opinion of the Ramban. Okay? That Bizman Hazeh, it's mutter to go to the HaBayis. Why? You ready for this? Remember, the Gemara tells us, why is the Yom Tov called Chanukah? Because of the Chanukas HaMizbeach. They built a new Mizbeach. Why did they have to build a new Mizbeach? Because the Yevanim came and they were mashakates, they defiled the stones. That as soon as the Yevanim touched the stones, the Kedusha left. This principle is called Bo Pritzim V'Chilaluhu. The wanton ones, the disgusting ones come and they defile it. It means like this. When Goyim are involved in something, the Kedusha runs away. Says the Ramban, when the Goyim came to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, they didn't destroy the Beis HaMikdash. The Kedusha ran away before they got there. Because there's a principle that whenever Goyim get their hands on, the Kedusha is nifka. It leaves, is defiled. For instance, I'll give you a perfect, you know who utilizes this? The Chassam Sofer. When do we fast for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash? What day of the month? No? 9th of Av. That's what we hold. Rabbi Yochanan said, I would establish the 10th of Av. Why? Because the majority, 99% of the Beis HaMikdash burnt down on the 10th. And what did the Rabbanon hold? Says the Gemara, the Rabbanon hold, Aschalta de Poranusa Adifa. It's the first moment, that's the main thing. And the first moment was on Tisha B'Av. Explains the Chassam Sofer very, very beautifully. As soon as the Goyim set fire to the Beis HaMikdash, it wasn't the Beis HaMikdash anymore. The Kedusha left. So what was burning down on the 10th was just a secular building. The only time sanctity was burning was the first moment, the 9th. That's why we fast the 9th. But that's the principle of Bo Paritzim Mechalaluv. Says Ramban, when the Goyim came to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, if you would put on your halachic glasses, you would see all the Kedusha leaving. And therefore, Bizman Hazeh, how much Kedusha is there in the Makayim HaMikdash?
0.
Very good. Excellent. 0. None. There is no Kedusha, says Ramban, in the Makayim HaMikdash. Could you go there if you're Tameh? Yes. What if you're a Balkari? Eat your heart out. Nida, Yoiledes, Zama, Tameh Meis. Go there. Could you go there as a tourist? Mutter. Could you go there? Whatever you want, whatever your reason is, you're allowed to go there. According to Ramban, the Kedusha left. So if I ask you at this point in this year, if someone is Tameh, could they go to the HaBayis? It's a machloikis. The Rambam says you're chayiv kares. The Ravid says you can't do it, but you're not chayiv kares. The Ramban says mutter. So now what we would like to look into, so what's the halacha? Who do we paskin like? Well, we begin like this. Whenever you want to know who to paskin like, well, what has the Jewish community been doing for the last 1,000 years? Did Jews go? Did tzaddikim go? Or did tzaddikim not go? Did observant Jews go? Did observant Jews not go? Well, we start with the comment of the Meiri. The Meiri was in the 14th century, And the Meiri writes, one of the most mind-boggling things you will ever see. Yeah? What does the Meiri say? Look at number 12. Meiri, Masechta Shvuos, Daf Tezayin, Ha-minog pashut likanes sham. The minog is to go there. Lefi masha shamanu, according to what I heard. Whoa. The Meiri is writing, the minog is to go there. That's what he heard. On the other hand, we have the commentary, Kaftor V'Ferach. Kaftor V'Ferach was written by Rav Ashturi HaParchi, also in the 14th century. He was a big traveler. And he writes about what the customs of Eretz Yisrael were in his time. And he tells us that nowadays, tells us first in Perek Vav on page Kuf Beis, we are not allowed to go into the HaBayis and within, because a Tful Yom cannot go into the Machaneh Leviyah. Well, what's a Tful Yom? A Tful Yom is somebody who had a bodily tumah, went to the mikvah, but he still has to wait until sunset of that day to be fully pure. So says Rav Ashturi HaParchi, says the Kaftor V'Ferach, that nowadays we're not allowed to go on the HaBayis because we're all a Tful Yom? Very strange. I mean, if we went to the mikvah yesterday, then we're not a Tful Yom the next day. But then later on, he writes explicitly that nowadays, in our great sin, we have to stand on the outside. We could only approach the walls. V'chein amadaber, and that's the custom. In other words, the custom is we don't go to the HaBayis. So now we have a major problem here, because we have two Rishonim, the Meiri and the Kaftor V'Ferach. They both lived at the same time, and the Meiri says the custom was yes to go, and the Kaftor V'Ferach says the custom was not to go. So comes the Shas Tshuvas Minchas Yitzchak, Rav Dayan Weiss, Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss, and he says, in Judaism we have a very important rule, and that is, Eino doime shmiya l'riyah. Eino doime shmiya l'riyah. That means, as convincing as it is to hear something, there's nothing like seeing it for yourself. Right? So people say, yeah, I don't have to come to the shiur. I'll hear it on TorahAnytime. No. You have to see it. You have to see it. There's nothing like seeing. Seeing is believing. Hearing is not believing. Seeing is believing. So says the Minchas Yitzchak, the Meiri didn't say he saw people go. The Meiri said he heard people go. But Rav Ashturi HaParchi, Kaftor V'Ferach, he was there. He saw people weren't going. So who are you going to give more credibility to? The eyewitness account as opposed to hearsay testimony. And therefore says the Minchas Yitzchak, we're not going to rely on the Meiri, because the Meiri is only reporting what he heard, and the Kaftor V'Ferach is reporting what he saw. Comes the Tzitz Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda of Aldenburg, who was the Meira Hayra for Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, and in a tshuva he wrote in 1967, when we regained access to the HaBayis, he says, listen to this. He says now that we have the HaBayis, all of these yeshiva talmidim are coming and saying, look what I found! Meiri says that 700 years ago, the custom was to go to HaBayis. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, one thing you got to know about minog is that not every minog is correct. I remember someone once came to me. He says, Rabbi, why are you so strict on talking by davening? My minog is to talk by davening. My minog. My father talked, and that's what I do also. So Rabbi Vadi Yosef says that the letters minog could be unscrambled to spell Gehenim. Some minhagim, they lead you to very hot places. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, this is one of those minhagim. The Meiri is just saying the minog is to go, but guess how it started? Most probably, says Tzitz Eliezer. It started like this. It said there was a guy who knew nothing. He was an Am Haaretz, and he went. And then his friends joined him. And then people figured, oh, look, this must be a frum thing to do to go to the HaBayis. And before they knew it, this was, the religious thing to do. And says the Tzitz Eliezer, Meiri was not aware, maybe, that this minhag started incorrectly. I have to admit that's a very bold thing to say about a Rishon, commenting on a minhag, but that's what the Tzitz Eliezer says. And who says they actually went to the makom of the Azara? Maybe they were toivel, and they knew exactly where they could go, where they couldn't go, and they only went to the places that they could go. And then the Tzitz Eliezer says something very important. And that is, does anybody know, the Meiri lived 600 years ago. Does anybody know when we found the writings of the Meiri? Within the last 100 years. The Tzitz Eliezer quotes the Chazon Ish that a Rishon that didn't make its way through the tradition of the Jewish people. In other words, all the Rishonim that we have, most of them, the Rambam, the Ramban, we've had it for the last 800 years. And all the Talmidei Chachamim throughout the ages have been sweating and analyzing and combing through every word. And any time they detect maybe there's a mistake in the printing, they'll comment, I think there's a printing error over here. But a comment of a Rishon that only showed up in the last 50 years or so, that never went through the tradition, the rigors of the Talmudic analysis of all the centuries, we can't be sure that these are accurate texts. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, it's very possible that what the Meiri wrote was, I heard the minhag is not to go. And there was a corrupted text. And the text that came to us was, I heard the minhag was to go. Because the Meiri was only found within the last 100 years. It never had the analysis of hundreds of years worth of Talmudic analysis of all the Gedolei Achronim. And therefore we cannot rely on the text of the Meiri. And says the Tzitz Eliezer, are you ready for this? You know why maybe the Meiri is saying the minhag was to go? Ready for this? Because maybe the Meiri held like the Ramban, that once the Goyim came and destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, the Kedusha left. But says the Tzitz Eliezer, in 1967, when we regained control of the HaBayis, the Kedusha came back. And now the Yisur D'Oraisa and the Kares is in full force. The Ramban only said it because the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. But now, says the Tzitz Eliezer, maybe political sovereignty, he maintains, is enough to restore. And he says this as just a suggestion. Okay. And, says the Tzitz Eliezer, don't we have the testimony of Rabbi Avadi Bar Tanura in his travels, that Rabbi Avadi Bar Tanura writes in 1448, no Jews went to the HaBayis. And therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, you cannot rely on this testimony of the Meiri, that the custom was to go to the HaBayis. Others want to bring a proof from the following. The Rambam in a letter writes that he was at sea and his boat was going to capsize. For many days he was in great fear, was in great dread, he was very worried, and finally the ship landed and he comes, says the Rambam, to Yerushalayim, to the Bayis HaGodol VeHaKadosh, and he davened. That's what the Rambam writes. It's quoted in the Sefer Charedim. So the Rambam himself is saying that he himself went to the Beis HaMikdash. Now the Beis HaMikdash was not standing in the times of the Rambam, but the Rambam's saying he went to that place. So maybe we should be able to glean from there that Bizman Hazeh, you're allowed to go. Well, this is also an issue that is addressed by the Tzitz Eliezer. He says, only a fool could believe that the Rambam, even though he wrote in his Sefer that if you go to the HaBayis, you're chayiv kares, he actually went there. So what does this mean? What does it mean? Says the Tzitz Eliezer, well, some people would like to suggest that this was not written by the Rambam, but rather the Ramban. And the Ramban says he went to the HaBayis because the Ramban, l'shitase, holds the Kedusha left and you could go. Tzitz Eliezer says that's impossible because if you look at the date of the letter the date of the letter was written in the year 4,925 from creation, and the Ramban would not be born even until another 29 years later. Says it Tzitz Eliezer, the Rambam definitely wrote these words. But you have to say what the Rambam meant was, of course, if someone goes there betuma, they're chayiv kares. The Rambam went to the mikvah, and he knew exactly where on the HaBayis was not yet the Azara. And that location, since the Rambam knew definitively what was and what wasn't Azara, he was allowed to go. But for us, who don't know exactly where the Azara begins, we would not be permitted to go. The Minchas Yitzchak Bichlal says that this whole concept, this whole idea that the Rambam writes, he davened in the Bayis HaGadol HaKadosh, it's a joke. Doesn't mean the Rambam went to the HaBayis, to the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Minchas Yitzchak, most probably there was a shul in the vicinity of the Beis HaMikdash that the Rambam davened in, and it was close by, and that's why the Rambam says the same way I was zocha to daven in this place, which was destroyed, we should all be zocha to daven in the built of the Beis HaMikdash, but not that the Rambam actually went to the Makkah HaMikdash. Says the Minchas Yitzchak, it never happened. Nishkashtoibin, nishkafloigen, loy dubin b'layar, loy haya b'lay nivra. The Rambam never went to the HaBayis. If anything, we know, says the Minchas Yitzchak, that the Kaftor Vaferach was a student of the Rambam, or at least was an admirer of the Rambam. And he wrote already explicitly the custom is not to go. So you think the Rambam would have gone? Then why is the Kaftor Vaferach saying the minhag is not to go? And therefore, this has no basis whatsoever. Okay. So again, let's just clarify for a moment. At this stage in the Shiur, if someone was Tameh, went to the HaBayis, what would the deal be? Machlokes Rishonim. Rambam says chayiv kares. The Rabbi says it's asur midaraisa, you're not chayiv kares. And the Ramban says it's mutter. Who do we pass him like? The Rambam? The Ravid? Or the Ramban? Comes the Magen Avram, look at number 19. Comes the Magen Avram, and the Magen Avram says that the Ravid had many kashas on the Rambam. It says the Magen Avram, I feel the kashas are answerable, and therefore, Imkain Divrei HaRambam Shririn the Kayamim. We uphold the words of the Rambam. V'hanichnas ata l'makayim ha'mikdash chayiv karesh shekulanu tmei mikdash. That if you go to the actual place of the mikdash, we paskin like the Rambam, you're chayiv karesh. There's actually a psak of the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah in Siman Tav Kuf Samach Aleph, Mishnah Berurah says, we paskin like the Rambam, that if you enter the HaBayis today betuma, you enter the mikdash today betuma, you're chayiv kares like the Rambam. The Chafetz Chaim tells us and directs us to look in the Sefer Likutei Halachos. Likutei Halachos is the Chafetz Chaim's halachic compendium of what is the halacha lemaisa of all laws of Kachim. Chafetz Chaim was very concerned Mashiach would come. And if Mashiach would come, nobody would know what to do halacha l'maisa. So the Chafetz Chaim wrote halacha l'maisa of Dinei Beis Hamikdash. And in the Likutei Halachos, Chafetz Chaim writes, we paskin like the Rambam. You know why? Because most Rishonim side with the Rambam. Says the Chafetz Chaim number 21 in Likutei Halachos. The Smag, the Sefer HaTshuma, the Sefer HaChinuch, the Ritva, the Tashbetz, the Torah. Says the Chafetz Chaim, I don't even understand why the Magen Avram says that he agrees to the Rambam. He should have been clear that almost all the Rishonim agreed to the Rambam. By the way, the Pa'as HaShulchan passes like the Rambam. So halacha l'maisa, there is no question, there's absolutely no question that we paskin like the Rambam, which means that a person who's a Baal Keri, if a person's a Nida, they cannot go anywhere past the Kotel, the Kaisel, the Kosel, whatever you want to call it. Right? the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, the Wall, whatever you call it. You can't go past there if you're a Balkari, a Nida, a Yeledes, a Zav. So you say, no problem. Because if somebody is a Balkari, someone had relations, or if someone had an emission, just go to the mikvah. So I'll go to the mikvah. No problem. I'll go to the mikvah, and then I'll go to HaBayis. Are you allowed to do that? Fine, we paskin like the Rambam. I'll give you that. We don't paskin like the Ramban. And we don't paskin like the Ravid. Paskin like the Rambam. So I'll go to the mikvah. What's stopping a Jew from going to a mikvah and going to the HaBayis? Oh, besides the Arabs. But what else? Is there any halacha? Just go to a mikvah. A lot of people go to the mikvah every day anyway. So there are basically two reasons why observant Jews are not allowed to go. Unobservant Jews are not allowed to go also. There are basically two reasons why Jews cannot go to the HaBayis today. Number one, there is an emission called Ziva. We don't know what it is anymore, and we're not really concerned for it. But entering the Beis HaMikdash and the HaBayis, because it carries with it such a strict punishment, kares, we have to be concerned that maybe one time in our lives, unknowingly, we emitted Tumas Ziva. No. It could have. No, you have to be concerned that maybe it happened one time in a person's lifetime.
The mikvah doesn't cover ziva?
So you say, so go to the mikvah. It doesn't help to go to a mikvah for ziva. To remove Tumas Ziva, you need to count 7 days and go to a living spring of water. And therefore, the Tzitz Eliezer brings down from the Sefer Chazoi Nachum that nowadays, at least for the purposes of going to the HaBayis, we have to suspect we're a Zavin, and you need to count 7 days and go to the mikvah. And most people can count to 7. Most people, they can't count past 5. No, but really. People can't count. And even people know how to count to 7, they don't know when to start counting. And many people don't know how to find a mikvah that's Mayim Chayim. So you say, come on. That's why I can't go to the HaBayis? So I could count to 7, and I'll go to the Arizal's mikvah, or I'll find a living spring of water, and then I'll go to the HaBayis. Well, the Chazoi Nachum says, many people get very confused. Now, this is not like going to the mikvah Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur, you go to the mikvah, okay. So, you take a shower first, but, what if you come out of the mikvah and there's a chatzitza? Okay, it's only a minhag. We're not so makbid with tefillas Erev Yom Kippur. But for this, if you have the slightest chatzitza, it could be a problem. So we're very concerned about it. So we say, we're worried maybe the person's a zava, and he didn't count 7 days, and he didn't go to a mikvah Mayim Chayim. So you say, but I'll do it. But I want to go to the HaBayis. I want to go to the holiest spot on earth. I want to stand on the rock. So I'll count to 7, and I'll go to Arizal's mikvah. It still doesn't help. Because there's a shita that we know a zava has to bring a carbon. Yeah, he has to bring a carbon, but we don't have karbanos b'zman hazeh. And you're tahar, even if you don't bring the carbon. No, there's an opinion. Mechusar kipurim dezav kizavhu. Which means, when it comes to a zav, if you didn't bring a carbon, you're still a zav. And therefore, there's an opinion, bizman hazeh, if you're a zav, you will remain a zav, and forever you shall be a zav until Mashiach comes. And there's no way to remove it. And that is one major reason we don't go to the HaBayis. Because we suspect Tumas Ziva. So you say it's very far-fetched, Tumas Ziva, no one ever heard of it, no one ever saw it. And even if I did, I'll count 7 days, I'll go to the mikvah, and we don't paskin, that's what the poskim say. That only precludes you from going to the Azara, but not the HaBayis outside of the Azara. By the way, you should know, the stipler was very concerned that maybe we're Zavim today. Because I'll tell you a very important afkamina. Beyond the Kaisel is the HaBayis. Before the Kaisel is not the Har. By the way, the Kaisel is not the wall of the Beis HaMikdash. Doesn't matter who told you that. Doesn't matter how long you thought that. I said this many times publicly. It's a very big mistake. All the Poskim say the Kaisel has nothing to do with the Beis HaMikdash. It's the retaining wall of the HaBayis. Kulei Alma Lo Pligi. Everybody agrees. So beyond the Kaisel is the HaBayis. Before it is outside the HaBayis. What about, could you stick your finger in the stones? Because if in the stones already is the HaBayis, so you can't do it. You can't stick your finger in the stones. Unless you go to a mikvah. Because you have to be worried. Maybe definitely a person has worries about carry, unless you went to the mikvah. Or a nida. You can't. So, but I want to stick my note. Dear Rebbeinu Shalom, please let me win the lottery on Tuesday. No, you can't stick in the note. It could be a very severe prohibition. Unless you go to the mikvah. Because inside the Chazon Ish held, so you say, fine, I'll go to the mikvah and then I'll stick in my note. But maybe we're Zavim. So they asked the stipler, can I go to the mikvah and stick in a note? Or do I have to worry that I'm a Zav? So the stipler said like this, if you go to the mikvah to remove tumas, carry, then you could stick your finger in, because al tumas ziva, you could rely on the opinions that the holes in the wall, since they're going to the outside, have the status of the outside. But you see, by the way, it's important to know. You can't just indiscriminately stick your finger into the holes of the walls. It's machlokes haposkim. Certainly, if a person didn't go to the mikvah, that would be problematic. Okay, so that's the first reason we can't go to the HaBayis. We have to be concerned that lest the person be a zav.
Touching the wall is not a problem?
I didn't say it's not a problem. Could you touch the wall? The stipler says it's reasonable to assume you're allowed to. Yes. I think in the widespread custom is to touch the wall of the kaisel. But you should know the brisker Rav would not go in the close proximity to the wall. But Moshe says, and that's
because of this?
Moshe says it's unclear why. But in any event, the custom is, in general, most Gedolei Yisrael, they go up to the wall, they touch the wall. Okay. Here's the other problem with going to the HaBayis. One thing is for sure, we're all Tamei Meis, yeah? So you say, okay, but a Tamei Meis is allowed to go on the HaBayis. It's just you can't go to the place where the Mikdash was. But the thing is, we don't know exactly where on the HaBayis the Mikdash was. Because when we say HaBayis, it doesn't mean the whole mountain. The HaBayis halachically was only 500 amos by 500 amos, somewhere on the mountain. Where on the mountain, we don't know exactly. Look at number 26. The Mishnah Midai says that the HaBayis was 500 amos by 500 amos. And the Piskei Tosfos says, but it wasn't the whole mountain. The whole mountain is not the HaBayis. Somewhere on the mountain is the halachic HaBayis, and somewhere on the halachic HaBayis is the Azara. And we really don't know where. So even if a person goes to the mikvah and removes tumas kari, and goes to the mikvah of Mayim Chayim and removes tumas ziva, so now you say, why can't I go to the HaBayis? I'll make sure not to go over where the Beis HaMikdash was. No, you can't be sure. Things got so mixed up and things have been dug up. And just because archaeologists say this is where it was, you can't really rely on that. And you have to be concerned lest you pass by the Makam and the Azara. And therefore, since we're all Tamei Meisim, you don't go to the HaBayis. Okay? These are the two main reasons. Now I want to tell you a little story. In the year 1867, Sir Moses Montefiore came to Eretz Yisrael with his rabbi, Dr. Levi, Zechron Levracha, and he entered the Makam HaMikdash. And the Gedolim were not happy with him. The Reb Shmuel Misalant warned him not to go. And we'll see whether he warned him before or after. He said, you can't rely on the Ravid. Most Paiskim, most Rishonim say, like the Rambam, that you can't go. And even the Ravid just says you're not Chayiv Kares, but it's still usher to go. Bottom line is, he comes back from the HaBayis, and Rosh Hashanah said, I told you not to go. He said, I didn't realize I wasn't allowed to go for halachic reasons. I thought I wasn't allowed to go because the Arabs don't let, but I paid them off, and they let me go. But I didn't realize it was usher, and many Jews put him in cherem. But Rav Shmuel Salant and Rav Meir Auerbach screamed at those Jews who put him in cherem. So let's get a little bit the historical facts of who put him in cherem. Well, in 1867, when Moses Montefiore came back from the HaBayis after entering the Mikdash, the son of the Nesivos HaMishpah was Rabbi Yaakov Milisa. His son, Rabbi Yosef Moshe Milisa, when he saw Moses Montefiore come out of the Makam HaMikdash, he took his shofar, he blew the shofar, and he put him in cherem. So what happened? Moses Montefiore, who Rabbi Ovadia Yosef writes in Chelek Hey, Siman Chav Zayin, the Yabia Omer, was a God-fearing Jew. He came to the Av Bezdin of Yerushalayim. He came to Reb Shlomi Salant, and the Rabbanim of Yerushalayim said, don't pay attention to the cherem of Rav Yosef Moshe Lisa, the son of the Nesivos. You know why? His cherem, there's an expression, is kecharomoy shel yam. It's just like the waves of the sea. Yam, standing for Yosef Moshe. Don't pay attention to him. So some people say, so the rabbis supported Moses Montefiore and they allowed him to go. Says Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, don't make that mistake. The rabbis did not support Moses Montefiore. All they did was they supported the fact that he should not be in cherem. Why shouldn't he be in cherem? Says Rabbi, you know why he shouldn't be in cherem? Because he didn't know you're not allowed to go. And if somebody doesn't know a halacha, you could yell at them, you could rebuke them, you could tell them that they're wrong, but you're not allowed to put them in cherem. The law of cherem is that you can only exercise somebody if they know. But if they don't know, you can't put them in cherem. And since Moses Montefiore innocently went, he thought the only reason you can't go is because the Arabs didn't let. Therefore, they were not allowed to put him in cherem. And, says Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, a very interesting thing, the Gemara Psachim and Daf Nun Gimel tells us that there was a man by the name of Toidos Ishroimi who should have been put in cherem, but they didn't put him in cherem. You know why? Because he supported Talmidei Chachamim. And someone who gives money to yeshivas, and they do an avera, you don't have to put them in cherem. You hear such a thing? Now it doesn't mean they're right, and it doesn't mean they're not going to burn, and it doesn't mean they're not going to get punished. It just means you don't have to forfeit their support because they didn't avera. And then Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says that it could be that in deference to the Ravid and the Ramban, who maybe say you're allowed to go, they didn't. That's why the Rav Shmuel Salant felt they should not have put him in cherem. However, that brings us to the following question. Let's say a person says, I know most halachic authorities say you can't do this, but I rely on the minority view. You ever hear people say this? Yeah, I know you're not allowed to do this, but there must be somebody who says you're allowed to. You ever hear that? You know? I know you're not allowed to drive on Shabbat, but there must be somebody who says you're allowed to. There's nobody who says you're allowed to. You know? What about somebody who says, yeah, but I'm doing this, I'm relying on the lenient opinion. Are you allowed to do that? No, you can't do that. There's no such thing. That's not Judaism. That's called worship of oneself. That's your own religion. But do we put you in cherem? Let's say a person decides he's going to follow his minority view. Do we put you in cherem? So some poskim say, we won't put you in cherem. In other words, you might burn, but we won't put you in cherem. But Rabbi says, nah, I don't like that. I hold we'll put you in cherem anyway. So we won't use that as a suggestion of why they didn't put Moses Montefiore in cherem, because he was relying on a minority view. No, relying on a minority view is not enough to get you out of cherem. Every Jew has to follow majority view. You can't even use it as an excuse to get yourself out of cherem. Okay, so HaBayis, bottom line, Bisman hazeh, are you allowed to go to the HaBayis? The answer is, it's unanimous among all accepted poskim that an Orthodox Jew, or any Jew for that matter, may not go anywhere on the HaBayis today. For the reasons we mentioned. You have to, not because we're Tamei Mesim. If I hear that anyone who came from this Shiur, when they were asked, why don't we go to the HaBayis? Oh, we're all Tamei Mesim. That means you didn't hear one thing we said tonight. That's not why we don't go. Number one, we don't go because we have to suspect that we have Tumas Zav. And number two, we don't know exactly where the Azara was, where the Mikdash was, and therefore we have to suspect that even though we think maybe it's not the HaBayis, maybe it's not the Mikdash, we have to suspect it is. And and therefore, since we're Tamei Mesim, we have to be concerned that we are entering a Makam HaMikdash. Who says this? Well, when we reclaimed rights to the HaBayis 1967, the Stipler wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote many letters until he came up with the letter we have in number 30, that Bisman hazeh, the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash has not diminished, has not dissipated. It is a terrible Avera to go there, Betuma, even Bisman hazeh, because of Tumas Zava. And, says the Stipler, even if you say, I'll go to a spring water, it still doesn't work. You know why? Because people are going to learn from your behavior. They're not going to know you went to the Arizal's mikvah. They're going to say, well, if he went, then I could go. I took a shower, and he went to Arizal's mikvah, and I took a shower, I used dial soap, and I can also go. No. Says the Stipler, and then he quotes the Tosefta. The biggest Avera in the Torah is going to the Beis HaMikdash or the HaBayis B'tumah. It is the most severe transgression in the Torah, and we'll see why. We'll see why. That's the conclusion of the Stipler. Comes along the Minchas Yitzchak, Dayan Weiss, and Dayan Weiss concludes the same way, that Bisman hazeh, we pass like the Rambam, and anyone who goes to HaBayis in any state of Tumah is Chayiv Kares, and we have to worry maybe we have Tumah Ziva, and we have to be worried maybe we don't know where the Beis HaMikdash is, and you can't go. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, the same conclusion, that Bisman hazeh we can't go. He writes, it doesn't matter what camp you come from. By the way, the Stipler writes, I don't care what camp you come from. I don't care who you associate with. Whether you're Hasidish, Litvish, Yeshivish, Haredi, Mizrahi, Dati Leumi, everyone, all halakhic authorities agree. Now it doesn't mean every rabbi agreed to this. There were rabbanim who were summarily rejected, who gave heterim, dubious heterim. But all credible poskim today, now throughout the generations you should know, there were a number of achronim who gave heterim. Just so you should know, the Sefer Derech HaKodesh and the Radvaz says it's mutter, but nevertheless, all the poskim Bizmanenu in unison strongly warn against it. The Tzitz Eliezer says even Rav Kook also writes that the halacha is like the Rambam, and Bizman hazeh, no one can make it their business to go to HaBayis. And regarding the political issue, people say, well, how shameful is it that we should give up sovereignty of the HaBayis to the Goyim? How does that look? What kind of covet is that for our people? Tzitz Eliezer quotes Rav Kook, who says, if you want to bring covet to Klal Yisrael, what you should do is build a big, magnificent shul right near the Kaisel. Build the most magnificent, most beautiful shul in the world. Make it out of gold, silver, copper. Make it able to house tens of thousands of Jews. The fanciest building. Let all Jews daven there, and that will serve as a declaration that we believe that right near this spot, Rebbeinu Shalom will reveal himself, and the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. But no covet is it to go past the Kaisel and incur a Chiyuv Kares. And the Tzitz Eliezer also quotes the Tosefta. Let me read it to you, number 34. The Tosefta says, of all the Averos in the Torah, the biggest sin is going to the Beis HaMikdash and the HaBayis B'tumah. Every other Avera in the world is atoned for with one goat. On Yom Kippur, you bring one goat, and all the Averos are atoned for. The Sar L'Azazel. Tumas Mikdash, you need 32 goats to get atonement. Every other Avera, you bring a goat once a year. To remove Tumas Mikdash, every Rosh Chodesh, says the Tosefta, the biggest Avera in the world is And therefore also in 1967, Rabbi Yosef and Yabi Omer Chelakesim Chavav was asked, now that we've freed the HaBayis, are we allowed to go there? And what about, fine, I won't go there. Could I take a helicopter ride over it? Could I take an airplane ride over it? I'll take a rocket ship over it. Says Rabbi Yosef, we paskin like the Rambam, that someone who goes to the HaBayis with Tumas Chayiv Misa, Chayiv Kares, not only can you not walk there, you can't fly over it in a helicopter. The Kedusha goes all the way up to Shamayim. You can't go in a plane, not in a Boeing 747. I don't care. It was the first plane invented by the Wright brothers. I don't care where you got your airplane. You can't go there. You can't parachute over it. You can't skydive across it. All the way up to the heavens. Says Rabbi Yosef, it's a mitzvah rabbah, and this is why we have the shiur tonight, to be mefarsem the Yisr, and to tell the rabbim that going to the HaBayis incurs the penalty of kares. And therefore, says Rabbi Yosef, you have to distance yourself very greatly, even if you go to the mikvah, even if you go to a mayim chayim. And until then, Rabbi Say, we await the great day when the Rebbeinu Shalom will reveal himself. Pisaim, Yavai, Ha'adam, Ash'atem, Avakshim. The Rebbeinu Shalom will reveal himself, and then we should all be Zoicha, Lalois, B'Yushalayim, B'Simcha, Rabbi, B'Yaskal, Tzedek, Meher B'Yameinu, Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.